Let's take a look at the console and see what we can get it to do. So I'm pressing Command Option J on my keyboard to bring up the console. Remember, you can also go right click and click on Inspect, and that will bring up the console as well. Now, in a previous lesson we talked about how I can just simply type in some math expressions here and it will give me the right answer. If you wanted to actually have the console print something out, you can use a command called console.log. And what this is doing is asking JavaScript to talk to the console and then access its logging method. Now, a method is like an action that something can do. So the console has the ability to log or write something to itself. So if I were to put a number in here, it's going to write 123. Now you'll notice it says undefined underneath it, and there's a little arrow meaning coming back. What that means is that this method, this little task, printed that to the console, but it doesn't return anything back. And we'll talk about methods returning values a little later on. But right now it's just telling you this method doesn't return anything, but it did print something out onto the console. So if I repeat that command, and by the way, you can look at your previous commands that you've typed by pressing the up and down arrow keys to get there quickly. So if I wanted to type in some text, like one of the things you often do is you want to print out hello world. It's sort of the test that you do as a programmer to see if you've got something working correctly. So I might just go ahead and put the text hello world inside that logging method, and when I hit enter, you'll see I get this ugly red error message, and it says I've got a syntax error. And it says it's missing a right parentheses after the argument list. Now, that doesn't really seem to make a whole lot of sense because it looks like we've got our bracket here and our bracket here, and what we want to print goes inside of it. And that's how console log works. Whatever you put inside of those brackets is what's going to try to print out to the screen. And it looks like we've got one here and one here. But it says it's missing after the argument list. So we'll talk a little later about syntax. But for now, just know that if you want to print out text, you need to make sure that you surround it in quotes. So now this text, hello world, is surrounded in quotes, and when I hit enter, it prints out hello world to the screen. And you can do this as much as you want with whatever string you want. And it'll work fine. You can even go ahead and put numbers inside of there, inside of the quotes, and it will print out numbers. Now, what you might notice if you look carefully is that this 123 is in black, whereas the 123 up here is in blue. That's because in JavaScript there's actually a difference between numbers and text. And we'll get to that a little later, but just as a bit of a preview, I'll show you if I were to write to the console 10 times 20, that prints out 200. It essentially does this math and then prints it out. However, if I wrote to the console 10 times 20, it prints out the text 10 times 20 because anything inside of quotes is thought of almost like a letter rather than a number. That should be good for now. We'll look at other ways that we can use the console to do output in future lessons.